Sarah, armed with the rumor, had spent the last 2 days asking every soul in the tomato fields if they had seen or heard of a Tom looking for his Sarah. Most gave her blank stares, others offered pitying glances. Her hope, so recently rekindled, began to flicker precariously. Had she been mistaken? Was it just another cruel trick of the road? Another false dawn? She sat by her tent, the wooden bird clutched in her hand, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and purple. A truck rumbled into the camp, kicking up a cloud of dust. It was late, and most of the pickers were already settling down for the night. She barely noticed it, her thoughts lost in a haze of disappointment. But then, a voice she hadn't heard in years, a voice that sent a shiver down her spine and made her heart leap into her throat. Sarah. It was faint, hoarse, but unmistakably his. She spun around, her eyes scanning the figures emerging from the dusty truck. And there he was, taller, perhaps, his face more weathered, lines etched around his eyes. But it was undeniably Tom, her Tom. He was looking at her, his eyes wide, disbelieving. Then slowly, a smile broke across his face, a smile that reached his eyes and made them shine. "Tom," she whispered, her own voice barely audible, a fragile thread of sound. She dropped the wooden bird, forgotten, and ran. They met in the middle of the dusty camp, oblivious to the stares of the other workers. It wasn't a graceful reunion, no grand declarations, just a desperate, bone-deep embrace. Sarah threw herself into his arms, burying her face in his chest, inhaling the familiar scent of him, dust, sweat, and something else, something uniquely Tom. His arms wrapped around her, holding her so tight she thought her ribs might crack, but she didn't care. She clung to him, tears streaming down her face, tears of relief, of joy, of years of unspoken longing. He held her just as fiercely, his own eyes wet, his voice thick with emotion. "Sarah," he whispered, over and over again, as if trying to convince himself she was real. They just stood there for a long time, rocking gently, a silent communion of two souls finally reunited. All the years of separation, the endless miles, the gnawing fear, the loneliness, it all melted away in the warmth of that embrace. The world outside them, the dusty camp, the setting sun, faded into insignificance. There was only them, together again, a miracle in a world that had tried so hard to pull them apart. Sarah pulled back slightly, looking up at his face, tracing the new lines, the familiar strength. "I knew you'd find me," she said, her voice choked with emotion. Tom smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that erased years of hardship. "And I knew you'd be waiting." Their reunion sent ripples through the camp. Other migrants, hardened by their own losses, watched with a quiet awe. A glimmer of hope sparked in their weary eyes. Sarah and Tom sat by a small, crackling fire, their hands clasped tight, their voices soft, catching up on years of missed moments. They spoke of the dusty roads, the different fields, the kindness of strangers, and the cruelty of others. Tom pulled the smooth stone from his pocket, placing it in Sarah's palm. "Always kept it," he said, his voice husky. Sarah smiled, tears blurring her vision. She told him about her wooden bird, how she had clutched it tight on the train, how it had been a tangible link to him. "It felt like you were with me," she whispered. They talked late into the night, the embers of their fire reflecting in their eyes, two souls finally finding their way back to each other. They spoke of their dreams, dreams that had been put on hold, dreams of a small farm, a home of their own, a place where the dust wouldn't always be blowing so fierce. It wouldn't be easy, they knew that. The world was still a hard place, full of trials and tribulations. But now they would face it together. They were no longer two lost souls adrift on the wind. They were a unit, a strength forged in separation, now made whole again. The next morning, the sun rose, casting long shadows across the camp. But this morning felt different, brighter. Sarah and Tom walked hand in hand through the bustling activity, a quiet joy radiating from them. They found work together in the tomato fields, side by side, their hands moving in rhythm, a dance learned from years of hardship. The work was still difficult, the sun still hot, but the burden felt lighter, shared. They talked as they worked, their voices blending with the rustle of leaves and the distant shouts of other pickers. They planned their future, small dreams whispered into the warm California air. "A little patch of land," Sarah said, "with a garden and maybe a porch swing." Tom nodded, his eyes bright. "And a roof that don't leak, and food on the table every night." Simple dreams, really, but monumental in their shared history. They knew the road ahead would still be challenging, but they faced it with a new strength, a quiet resilience born of their reunion. The dust might still blow something fierce sometimes, and the world might still try to separate them, but their hearts, once scattered by the winds of change, were now firmly entwined. They had found each other across a continent of dust and despair, and that was a victory worth more than all the gold in California. They saved every penny, scrimping and sacrificing, turning their backs on small luxuries for the bigger dream. Nights were spent by the fire, poring over tattered newspapers, searching for any whisper of cheap land, any possibility of a small corner of the world they could call their own. Other migrants, witnessing their unwavering determination, often offered a helping hand, a kind word, or a shared meal. The network of the road, once a symbol of their separation, now became a source of unexpected support. One older woman, who had lost her own family to the dust, often shared her wisdom. "Hold on to each other," she'd say, her voice raspy. "That's the only thing that truly matters in this life." Sarah and Tom absorbed her words, understanding their truth deep in their bones. They knew the hard times weren't over, that the depression still held its tight grip on the nation, but they also knew they weren't alone anymore. The shared dream became a tangible thing, a light at the end of a long, dark tunnel. They talked about names for their future children, silly names, serious names, their laughter echoing in the quiet night. The future, once a terrifying unknown, now held the promise of warmth and belonging. One brisk autumn morning, a dusty old truck pulled into the migrant camp. Out stepped a grizzled old man, his face a roadmap of wrinkles, but his eyes held a twinkle. He wasn't looking for workers, he was looking for a specific kind of family. "Heard tell of a young couple," he rasped, "who stuck it out, through thick and thin, looking for a chance at something real." He had a small farm, a struggling patch of land not far from the coast, but he was too old and tired to work it alone. He needed strong backs, willing hearts, and a spirit that wouldn't break. The other migrants pointed him to Sarah and Tom. They listened intently as he spoke, his voice weaving a tale of worn-out land and faded dreams. It wasn't California's golden promise, but it was their chance. A chance for a roof over their heads, a chance to work for themselves, a chance to plant roots in the soil. It was a risk, of course. The land was tired, the work would be hard, but looking into each other's eyes, they knew this was it. This was their shot. They packed their meager belongings one last time, the wooden bird and the smooth stone carefully placed in a small sack. They said their goodbyes to the familiar faces of the camp, leaving behind the transient life for the promise of something more permanent. The little farm was nothing fancy, just a small, weathered farmhouse leaning a bit to one side, a rickety barn, and a few acres of parched land. But to Sarah and Tom it was a palace. They spent their days working tirelessly, mending fences, clearing overgrown brush, coaxing life back into the tired soil. The sun still beat down, and the dust still swirled, but now it was their dust, their sun. Nights were spent by the warmth of a small wood stove, planting their crops, dreaming of the day they would see green shoots pushing through the earth. The old farmer, their benefactor, lived in a small cabin nearby, offering advice and sharing stories of the land. He taught them the rhythms of the seasons, the secrets of the soil, lessons learned over a lifetime of working the earth. It wasn't easy. There were days of doubt, days when their bodies ached so much they thought they couldn't take another step. But they leaned on each other, their love a steady flame in the face of hardship. Sarah would sing as she worked, her voice echoing across the fields, a melody of hope and resilience. Tom would hum along, his eyes always finding hers, a silent acknowledgement of their shared journey. Slowly, painstakingly, the farm began to flourish. Green shoots emerged from the once barren earth, a testament to their unwavering spirit. Small chickens scratched in the yard, a cow grazed in the pasture, and a tiny piglet snorted contentedly in the mud. The farmhouse, once weathered and bleak, began to feel like a true home, filled with the warmth of their shared laughter and quiet conversations. Sarah started a small kitchen garden, growing plump tomatoes and crisp lettuce, a luxury they hadn't known in years. Tom repaired the barn, his strong hands mending the broken wood, making it sturdy once more. They worked from sunup to sundown, their bodies tired but their hearts full. The old farmer, watching them with a proud twinkle in his eye, often spoke of their resilience. "You too," he'd say. "You got grit. Real grit." They knew it wasn't just grit. It was their love, a force that had carried them through the darkest days. The dust still blew, sometimes a reminder of the past, but it no longer felt like a threat. It was just a part of the landscape, a memory of where they had come from, a stark contrast to the life they were now building together. As the years unfolded, the little farm became a haven. The dusty roads, the crowded camps, the endless search, they were fading memories, replaced by the comforting routines of farm life. Sarah and Tom, though still young, carried the wisdom of their journey in their eyes. Their hands, once raw and blistered, were now strong and capable, seasoned by years of working the earth. They had learned to read the sky, to understand the whispers of the wind, to nurture life from the soil. The Depression slowly loosened its grip on the nation, and with it, a gentle prosperity began to bloom on their farm. Their crops yielded bountiful harvests, their animals thrived, and the small farmhouse resonated with the warmth of a life well lived. They often sat on their porch swing in the evenings, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky with fiery hues. The air was soft, filled with the chirping of crickets and the gentle lowing of their cow. Sarah would lean her head on Tom's shoulder, and he would wrap his arm around her, a gesture of quiet devotion. The porch swing became their sanctuary, a place where memories were shared and dreams were whispered. They talked about the early days, the hunger, the fear, the moment their hands slipped apart at the train station. It was still a painful memory, a scar on their hearts, but now it was interwoven with the joy of their reunion, the triumph of their resilience. Tom would pull out the smooth stone from his pocket, worn even smoother by countless touches, and Sarah would hold her wooden bird, its painted feathers faded but its meaning undiminished. These small tokens, once symbols of loss, were now reminders of their unwavering connection. They taught their children, who eventually filled the farmhouse with their laughter and playful shouts, the stories of the Dust Bowl, the stories of perseverance, the importance of holding on to hope and holding on to each other. The world can be a hard place, Tom would say, his voice gentle, but with love, you can get through anything. Sarah would nod, her eyes full of wisdom. And a little bit of grit, she'd add, a mischievous twinkle in her eye. One particularly harsh winter, a severe storm swept through, threatening to undo all their hard work. The winds howled, rattling the windows, and the snow piled high, trapping them inside. Panic began to set in, memories of past hardships stirring. The barn roof creaked ominously, and the livestock huddled together, scared. Sarah and Tom worked tirelessly, despite the biting cold, to secure everything, to protect their animals, to keep their home safe. Their neighbors, remembering the kindness they had shown, braved the storm to offer help, bringing food and extra blankets, a true community rallying around them. It was a stark reminder that even with a home and a family, life still presented its challenges. But this time they weren't alone. They had each other and they had a community that cared. They faced the storm with a quiet strength, their hands clasped together, their resolve unwavering. They knew the storm would pass, just as the dust storms had, just as the years of separation had. And when the sun finally broke through the clouds, casting a dazzling light on the snow-covered landscape, they stood on their porch, arm in arm, their spirits unbroken. The storm had tested them, but it had also reaffirmed the strength of their bond, the power of their resilience. As they grew older, the lines on their faces deepened, mirroring the rich tapestry of their lives. Their hair, once dark, was now touched with silver, like the frost on a winter morning. But their eyes, those familiar, loving eyes, still held the spark of their youth, the enduring flame of their devotion. The farm prospered, a vibrant testament to their hard work and unwavering love. Their children had grown, some staying on the farm, others venturing out into the world, but all carrying the stories of their parents, the lessons learned from the Dust Bowl. Sarah and Tom would often sit by the fire, just as they had on that first night, but now their bellies were full, their hearts at peace. They'd watch the flames dance, remembering the flickering embers of their last meal, the desperate hope that had fueled their journey. "Remember that potato, Tom?" Sarah would ask, a soft smile playing on her lips. Tom would chuckle, a warm, rumbling sound. "Hardest potato I ever ate, and the best." Their story became a legend in the community, a southern front porch folktale whispered from generation to generation. A tale of two young hearts, lost and found across a land ravaged by dust and despair. It was a story told with rhythm and repetition, like the